McDonald.
Last night, I attended the AgriFutures Rural Women's Awards dinner. What a terrific night. What extraordinary women. What great stories. Stories of innovation and imagination and optimism. But none of these stories would ever include trespassing on someone else's properties, scaring the family who live there and jeopardising the biosecurity of the animals involved. And I deeply resent members of the Greens in any way comparing the peaceful protests that farmers may have engaged in and will still be able to enjoy with this legislation in place with the terrifying, offensive and militant invasions that have taken place in Queensland. What this legislation seeks to stop is that sort of activism that we have seen recently in Queensland, where the lead proponent was posting to Facebook videos where she laughed at the paltry fines awarded by the magistrate, where no conviction was recorded, and calling the farms and the families that had been terrorised victims, and calling a shout-out to her crew for the next invasion. Queenslanders and Australians have begged this government to provide greater security for them and greater penalties for those activists who sought to provide distress and alarm to people who'd woken up that morning with no idea of how their lives were about to be changed for the worse. We in Parliament have a simple choice to make in these sitting weeks: to give in to anarchists or stand up strongly for what's right. What's right is to protect the law-abiding citizens from those who see the law not as a rigid framework for a civil society, but as a low bar they can simply step over to achieve their aims. It doesn't help that we hear inflammatory language from one of the country's senior unionists encouraging anyone to break laws they don't agree with. We even have senators from the Greens refusing to denounce what can only be described as anti-Australian behaviour. Aussie Farms head Chris Delforce's claim that tougher laws won't deter him from his campaign against farmers provides one positive. That is, we now have no doubt about the aims of those who would invade family homes, intimidate legitimate businesses and disrupt everyday Australians from getting to work and hospitals due to these illegal protests. They are simply picking a cause du jour as a vehicle for more sinister aims of sparking rebellion against what they see as an outdated and unfair system so they can impose their own worldview. To be clear, while these invasions are a fun outing for some, it is not for those living in fear of when the next invasion will come. In March, now Senators Gerard Rennick and Senator Paul Scar and I visited the Lemontree Feedlot to see my friends the McNamees, soon after their terrifying and distressing invasion by masked and uniformed invaders. David begged the invaders to leave his land and stay away from his frightened animals, and the scars of that day may never heal. I've been to the abattoir at Yangan and the butcher shop at Taringa, who were also victims of these illegal activism. To these people, the invasion was as distressing as you can imagine, and the loss of security and the sense of safety in their own home or workplace is unacceptable. I've seen farmers reduced to tears at the prospect of hordes of trespassers flooding their farms. I've heard 14-year-old schoolgirls say they've decided not to have children because they've been told by these extremists it would be cruel to bring children into a dead planet. Only the most morally bankrupt would see scaring children and robbing them of their future as a way to win an argument. Practical members of society scoff at such outlandish behaviour and get on with their day, but ignoring the anarchists amongst us has actually emboldened them. My colleague in the Senate, Paul Scar, has spoken publicly about Saul Alinsky, who published a book in 1971 called Rules for Radicals. Alinsky's advice to pick targets, freeze it, personalise it and polarise it wasn't just seized upon by 1970s hippies, communists and Marxists in the West. We see it happening today in the tactics of Aussie Farms, Extinction Rebellion, anti-Australia Day activists and climate change alarmists. Aided by the internet and soft laws, these people have ridden roughshod over Australian sense of decency and fairness. Another of Alinsky's rules is ridicule is man's most potent weapon, and from this we get terms such as denier, racist and words ending in phobe. If you have an opinion that diverges from the cultists, they don't just want to disagree with you, they want to destroy you, your family and your livelihood. And Alinsky used inflammatory words such as enemy, attack and threat in his treatise. So it is no wonder that activists view their aims not simply as a struggle, but as a war. Their greatest weapon in this war is the internet, and using it to incite others to carry out protests, legal and illegal, is why we need new laws. This bill introduces new offences for the incitement of trespass, property damage.
I can hardly hear the contribution from Senator McDonald for the carry-on at the end of the chamber by members of the Greens Party.
Thank you, Senator McKenzie. I would call the chamber to order and the senators to give us the opportunity to listen to the senator who's speaking now.
Thank you. The bill introduces new offences for the incitement of trespass, property damage or theft on agricultural land. As has been made abundantly clear, these laws don't ban legitimate protest, they don't seek to punish legitimate whistleblowers, and they don't prevent legitimate journalistic inquiry. But the key word here is legitimate. Repeated organised incidents of trespass by animal activists and their concerning lack of remorse is what has prompted this stronger action to deter those who incite this behaviour, especially via the internet. We have a chance here to stand up to the bullies. We have a chance to be on the side of what is good and what is right. We have a chance, we actually have a duty, to stand up for those who can't speak up for themselves and for those who have shown admirable restraint while waiting for government to provide new tools to the police and magistrates. Everyone has the right to feel safe in their home. Everyone has a right to conduct legitimate business. This country was built on farming, strong people developing a fertile land to grow the food and fibre the world wants and needs. But during a time of repeated anti-farming legislation from state Labor governments, and this time of dry, it has never been more important that we stand behind our Australian farmers and say, we need you, because we do. The difference between the determination of farmers and the churlishness of activists is that they are driven by love and the others by hate. Farmers love their lifestyle and love feeding and clothing families around the world. They are the best in the world at what they do. It is truly a noble profession performed by extraordinary people. And if you attack farmers, you attack the very fibre of Australia, and that is unacceptable. Common decency and the majority of reasonable and fair-minded Australians are counting on us to pass these laws, and I commend them to the House.